Muy buenos días,
Hello, good morning.
un gusto saludarles.
It's a pleasure to
Pues
greet
bienvenidos
all of
a
you.
este webinar, este
Welcome to
seminario
this
virtual,
webinar,
Resiliencia del Sistema Alimentario en las Ciudades
Resilience
Intermedias,
of the Food System
orientado
in
a equipos
Intermediate
municipales y
Cities,
nacionales de la región interesados en promover soluciones
with the
innovadoras
region
para la
that
planificación urbana
seeks
de los
to
sistemas
encourage
agroalimentarios,
innovating
mejorar la
solutions
resiliencia de
for
las
the
ciudades
agri-food
intermedias
systems to
frente a
improve the
estos
resiliency of
climáticos
intermediate
extremos
cities in
que
the
nos
face of
están
these extreme
azotando
weather events that
recientemente.
are
Para dar apertura al
happening
evento, quiero dar la bienvenida y la
nowadays. To
palabra
begin
al señor
this with
Mario
this event, I'd
Luetti,
like to
director
leave
adjunto de la
you
FAO,
with Mr.
representante regional para
Mariluetti,
América
the
Latina y
Director
Caribe.
of FAO,
Señor
representative for
Luetti,
Latin
le
America and
agradezco.
the Caribbean. Mr. Luetti, the floor is
Muchísimas
yours, sir.
gracias, distinguidas
Thank you very
autoridades de los
much,
gobiernos
distinguished authorities
locales,
of local
regionales
governments,
y nacionales,
regional
panelistas que
and national
participan en este
governments,
importantísimo debate,
panelists that are part of this
amigos,
important
amigas, colegas
debate,
de la FAO. Les
friends,
extiendo
colleagues of the FAO.
una
I'd like to
cordial
extend
bienvenida a este webinar,
warm
donde
welcome
compartiremos
to this webinar
experiencias
where
sobre el
we will share
fortalecimiento
experience on the
de la
strengthening
resiliencia de los sistemas
of resilience
agroalimentarios en
of
nuestras ciudades,
agri-food
a fin de
systems in
intercambiar y
cities
analizar
in order to
oportunidades y
exchange and
acciones
analyze
que garanticen
opportunities and
el acceso
actions that
a un
ensure the
entorno
access,
saludable y a
guarantee
alimentos
access to
nutritivos
a healthy environment
suficientes
and
en el contexto de la
nutritional
organización.
food
Las
that
ciudades,
are
como
enough within the
perfectamente
context of our
saben,
organization, the
crecen
FAO.
rápidamente y
Cities, as
enfrentan
we know, are
desafíos cada vez
growing
mayores en
rapidly and
lograr
they
sus
face increasingly
ambiciones.
more
Díganles a ustedes
challenges,
lo que
right?
significa. Para el año
I
2050 se prevé
do
que
not have to
casi el
explain this to you.
70% de la población mundial
By
vivirá en
2050,
zonas urbanas. Un
nearly
aumento
70% of the world
significativo
population
respecto al
is a
50%
significant,
del 2018.
is expected to live
Este
in urban
crecimiento es
areas
algo
versus
acelerado,
the 50% in 2018.
especialmente en ciudades
This,
intermedias. Presenta
in
enormes
intermediate
retos de
cities, this
sostenibilidad,
accelerated growth
incluyendo la
has
expansión física de
different
las ciudades y el
challenges,
incremento
including the
en
physical
la demanda
expansion
de
of cities and the
recursos y
increase in the
servicios.
demand of resources and
Esta
services.
presión puede llevar a la
This
degradación
pressure
ambiental,
can
a
lead us
conflictos,
to
a la escasez de
degradation,
recursos y el
conflicts,
deterioro de la
the
calidad
lack
de
of
vida
resources, and the
si no
deterioration
se
of
acciona adecuadamente.
the quality of
Las
life if
emergencias
not propered
climáticas
correctly.
añaden
Climate
una complejidad
emergencies
adicional a estos desafíos.
are,
Los
add
fenómenos
an additional
meteorológicos son cada vez
complexity
más
to this challenge, right?
impredecibles y fenómenos
Weather
extremos como la sequía,
conditions
las
are
inundaciones y las
unpredictable,
tormentas
and
sabemos que
droughts,
son cada vez
floods,
más
and
frecuentes.
storms, these type
Esta
of phenomena
realidad
we know that are
ya no es ajena para
increasingly
ninguno
more
de nosotros.
frequent. It's a reality
Las
that
recientes
is
acontecimientos en
ours,
Brasil,
right?
con
The
las
recent
inundaciones e incendios en Chile,
floods
o el
in
impacto devastador de
Brazil,
los huracanes
the
en el Caribe,
forest fires in
son
Chile,
solo
the
algunas
devastating hurricanes in the
las
Caribbean are just
infraestructuras
some of
urbanas
these
y los sistemas
weather events. The
alimentarios
urban
son
infrastructures and agri-food systems
extremadamente
are
vulnerables a los
extremely
eventos
vulnerable
climáticos.
to the weather and
Debe
climate
interrumpir el
event,
suministro de
which
alimentos
can
y poner en
interrupt
riesgo
the
la
supply of food
seguridad
and risk
nutricional y por eso
food
interconectamos cada uno de estos
safety,
factores.
security. That's why
La
we link
agricultura,
each one of these
profundamente
factors.
dependiente de los
Agriculture
recursos
that
naturales y las
depends on
condiciones
natural
climáticas,
resources and
es
the
uno de los
weather
sectores
conditions
más
is one of the
vulnerables.
most
A veces,
vulnerable sectors,
en nuestra región,
most vulnerable
la
to
pérdida
disasters. In
de
a
la
region, the
agricultura representa
loss
una disminución
of
promedio de
agriculture accounts for an
975
average of
kilocalorías per
975
cápita al día. Esto
calories per
implica
capita a
que
day,
los
which
impactos no
means
solo están
that
relacionados con
impacts
amenazas
are not only related
climáticas,
with threats,
sino
with
también con los
weather
altos
events
precios de
and
los
threats, right?
alimentos, con la
But
pobreza, con la
with the high
inequidad
price of
alimentaria,
food,
la
with
inseguridad alimentaria y
inequality,
la
poverty,
malnutrición.
food insecurity,
El reciente informe
malnourishment,
del
and
Estado de
hunger. The
Seguridad
recent
Alimentaria y Nutricional del Mundo, más conocido
report
como
of the
SOFI,
state nutritional
de
state known
2024
as
revela
SOFI in the
que alrededor
world
de
of
733
2024
millones de
says
personas
that around
pasaron
733
hambre en la
million
región.
people
Aunque en América
were
Latina y el Caribe se
famished
registró un aumento
globally, right? In
significativo
Latin America and the
con una
Caribbean, we
reducción de
had a
personas que
significant
pasan
increase
hambre
with a reduction of people
de
that
4.6 millones
are
que dejaron
hunger
esa situación
famished.
tan negativa
Four something
en
million of
nuestra
those
vieja
people that
región
left that
no progresan
negative situation, mainly in
en
South
nuestros
America, the
países hermanos.
progresses are still
La
unequal
región,
and
pensemos,
insufficient. The
41 millones
region,
de personas
we
aún
know that there
sufren
were 41 million
necesidades de
people
hambre.
that
El
still
hambre
suffer
y la malnutrición
from
continúan
hunger,
afectando a
right?
millones de
Malnourishment
ciudadanos
and
del
hunger
mundo.
still affect
Mejorar
the
nuestra
millions of
capacidad
people,
de
therefore improving
anticipación,
our capacity
de respuesta
of
rápida y creación de
rapid
resiliencia a largo
response, of
plazo es
anticipating this and
crucial para
creating
nuestro
long-term
país.
resiliency is crucial to face all these challenges.
Es indispensable que los centros urbanos
It's
estén
critical
mejor
that
definidos
urban centers
y
are
preparados
better
contra la perturbación climática y
prepared
medioambiental,
against
con el fin
these
de fortalecer los medios
environmental
de vida y la
disturbances and
población
climate
y
disturbances in
asegurar
order
el
to improve
acceso a
the
los
livelihood
recursos
of
y
our
servicios
population and ensure
esenciales.
access to
Desafortunadamente, el hambre y la
essential and
malnutrición
critical
continúan afectando
systems.
a millones de personas, impactando
Unfortunately, hunger is
desproporcionadamente
still
a las personas más
impacting and
vulnerables
affecting
y quienes
millions of
dentro de las
people,
ciudades son
impacting
los
the
más
most
afectados
vulnerable.
por la crisis
Within the cities, they're the ones that are most
alimentaria.
affected by weather and the food crisis overall.
Es fundamental desarrollar políticas
It's
inclusivas que
critical
aseguren el
to
acceso a
develop inclusive
alimentos
policies that
nutritivos
ensure
diarios
access to safe
que
food and
permitan
nutritional
recuperación y
food
adaptación
that
a la
allow
población sostenible.
recovery
Las
and
ciudades son
adaptation
centros de
to
innovación
climate
tecnológica
event, amongst
y pueden
others.
liderar la
Cities
creación de soluciones para
can
reducir la huella
lead
de
the
carbono
solution,
y
the
promover
creation
el
of
enfoque de
solution to
agricultura
reduce the
resiliente.
carbon footprint and to
Sin
improve
duda, contar con
and
sistemas
provide
agroalimentarios más eficientes
sustainable
y
environments.
resilientes
Having more efficient and
puede
resilient
contribuir al
agri-food
desarrollo
systems can
sostenible de las
contribute to
ciudades.
sustainable development of cities.
Estrategias como la producción
Beyond a
local,
doubt, strategies like local production,
la reducción de desperdicios de alimentos, la
the
actividad forestal,
reduction of
agricultura
food
urbana
waste,
y periurbana, la
forestry,
prevención de diques y
peri-urban
riegos,
and
la
urban
agricultura circular
agriculture,
y las
sustainable
tecnologías
diets,
verdes y
circular
limpias pueden
economy, and green
reforzar
technologies
esta transición.
must support the
Las políticas y
transformation
estrategias para la
processes.
resiliencia alimentaria
Policies and
deben ser
strategies
inclusivas y
for
participativas,
food resilience
incluyendo
must be
campañas de sensibilización y
participatory and
programas
inclusive, promoting
educativos y
different
plataformas de participación
civilization
ciudadana
campaigns and
que
platforms of
pueden
citizen
permitir a la
participation
y a los comunicadores en la adopción de prácticas
to
sostenibles.
help with
La
sustainable
urbanización
practices
rápida
and the adoption
y
of
el
them.
cambio
Rapid
climático son variables
urbanization and
presentes que
climate
presentan
change
desafíos significativos
present significant
para las
challenges
ciudades y la
for
resiliencia
cities
alimentaria. Sin embargo,
and the food
también ofrecen
resilience.
oportunidades para la
Nevertheless,
innovación y la transformación hacia
they also
sistemas
provide
agroalimentarios
the
más sostenibles.
transformation to agri-food systems that are more
Reitero, el
sustainable.
compromiso de la FAO para seguir
I'd like to yet again mention that the
promoviendo y
commitment of the FAO
fortaleciendo
to
una vez
continue
más
promoting, and I'm going to
nuestro
mention
reto
this yet
como
again,
FAO será
our
multiplicar
commitment as
esfuerzos
FAO is
que
to
mejoren
continue
la
promoting
sostenibilidad,
actions that
la
improve
resiliencia de las ciudades
sustainability and the
y proporcionar
resilience of
acceso a
cities,
alimentos
providing access
nutritivos
to
y suficientes.
nutritional and
Para avanzar hacia
sufficient
una mejor
food
producción,
to advance
una mejor
towards a
nutrición,
better production
un
of better
mejor medio ambiente
nutrition,
y una
a
vida
better
mejor para
environment,
todas y todos,
and a better
sin
life
dejar
for
a nadie
everyone
atrás,
without
ni
leaving
en los
anyone
países, ni en las
behind
regiones, ni en las ciudades.
in
Muchas
countries and
gracias.
regions or in cities. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Lubetkin, por sus
Thank
palabras
you very much,
bendiciones.
Mr. Mario
Este
Lubetkin,
webinar
for
está
your
siendo
opening
transmitido a
words. This
través del
webinar is
canal de YouTube
being
de FAO
broadcasted
Américas
through our
en
YouTube
sus redes
channels of
sociales. Les
FAO
sugerimos que
Americas and our
compartan
social
sus
media. And I would
preguntas
like to
pertinentes
suggest that you share
acerca de
your
este webinar
questions,
en
your
el chat
opinions
a
on
buzón
this
de YouTube.
webinar in the chat
Asimismo,
of
pueden
the YouTube
referirse al webinar
broadcast.
usando los
And
hashtags
you can
sistemas
refer to the
alimentarios,
webinar by using
resiliencia y
Sistemas
agri-food.
Alimentarios, Resiliencia, and
Vamos a iniciar
Intermediate Cities,
entonces con
those
nuestras
hashtags. We will
ponencias
begin with
principales.
our main
Eh,
speakers.
en 2022, la FAO realizó una
In
encuesta de
2022,
resiliencia
the FAO
alimentaria en el
conducted a
marco de
food
sistemas alimentarios
resilience
por región.
survey
Los
within the
hallazgos
framework of
permiten
city
identificar
regions.
aspectos
The findings
técnicos
allow
y de
showing all the
políticas que
technical
permiten
aspects
orientar
and
acciones
policy aspects
integrales ante
that
los eventos
guide
climáticos
different
extremos y otras
comprehensive actions in
disrupciones.
the face of
Para
extreme
abordar
weather
los
events and other
principales
disruptions
conceptos y
to
enfoques
face the
relacionados
main
con la
to
resiliencia alimentaria, doy la
approach
palabra a
food
Guido Santini,
resilience and the different
coordinador global del programa de sistemas
concepts, right? We have
alimentarios de
Guido
la
Santini,
región,
the
con
coordinator of
sede de la
city
FAO en
region
Roma.
agri-food systems in
Guido,
our
adelante,
FAO
por favor.
headquarters in or
A tu
branch in
intervención y espero
in
que al
Rome.
final
And
tengas
Guido,
minutos
go
para
ahead.
intercambiar un
The
par de
floor is
preguntas.
yours, sir. And at the end,
Muchas
we'll
gracias,
have
Sara.
some space for
Buenos
Q&A.
días
Thank
o
you very
buenas
much,
tardes a
Sarah.
todos.
And
Voy a
good morning
compartir
or good afternoon to
pantalla
everyone. I'm going to share
para
my
mostrar algunos
screen just to show
slides sobre
you a couple of
el
slides
estudio,
on
digamos, una
it's a
visión
study, right?
global
The
sobre
global
el tema de
mission
la resiliencia en las ciudades y regiones
on
urbanas.
resilience and
Espero que
urban
vean
regions
bien
and
mi
cities.
ventaja.
Oh, I hope you
Bueno,
can see my screen correctly.
empezando con el contexto, ¿no? Voy a,
We're going to start with the context.
digamos, a adjuntar mis palabras a la presentación, la introducción que el
I'm
señor Lubetkin
going
hizo para,
to add
bueno,
to what
llamar la
Mr.
atención
Lubetkin
a
mentioned.
la vulnerabilidad de los sistemas
And
alimentarios
I
en las
want to talk about the
ciudades.
vulnerability of
Parte de,
food systems in
de
cities.
la información que las ciudades son
Part of the
responsables de la
information
mayoría de
is
las
that cities
emisiones de
account or are
gases de efecto
responsible for
invernadero,
most of the
con el
greenhouse gas
70%.
emissions,
Y también la
the
industria
global
alimentaria
greenhouse
representa
gas emissions,
casi
and accounts for
40% de
70%,
las emisiones
and it's
totales.
almost 40% of total
Se
emissions.
estima también que el
We also
70% de
estimate
las
that
ciudades ya enfrentan
70% of cities already
fuertes
face
afectaciones por el cambio climático y en
climate
los próximos
change
años
challenges and
2.500
or
millones de
shocks. And for the
personas
next
en varias
years,
ciudades
2,500 million people
verán
in
reducida la
thousands of
producción
cities will
agrícola a
see
causa
agricultural
del cambio
production
climático.
reduced, right?
Eh,
With a reduction
es
caused from
importante
climate
también
change.
hablar que la FAO hace
We must
varios años
also note
está
FAO
tratando
for
el
many
tema
years now has
de la
been
resiliencia en
talking
apoyo
about
a las
resilience
ciudades
and
y regiones
support
urbanas
to
come si
urban
chiama,
regions and cities with the program
agri-food che
Cities
sarebbe,
Region,
no?
right? That
Estamos
Sarah mentioned, the Cities
trabajando
Region
para
program. We're
integrar
working
resiliencia
on this
científica
to
con los
integrate
estudios de
resilience in the
locales.
planning of
Primero,
local
evaluando
agri-food systems
el nivel de riesgo y vulnerabilidades
by assessing the level of risk and
a choques
vulnerability
múltiples en tema de
and in the
clima,
face of multiple shocks, right?
pandemia,
Regarding the climate, the
procesos
pandemic,
económicos y
financial
también
and economic
desarrollando
shocks,
estrategias para mejorar la
and also developing
resiliencia
strategies to
en las
improve
ciudades.
resilience in our cities.
En el marco de este programa, como
Within the
fue
framework
mencionado,
of this
hemos
program,
implementado un estudio
as mentioned
global
before, right? We've implemented a
sobre las
global
lecciones
study, a
aprendidas
review
de
on the
los
lessons
choques y
learned
las
about the
adaptaciones de los
shocks
sistemas
in
alimentarios locales.
local
Y esto
food
incluye
systems.
11
And
estudios de caso,
this includes 11
a
case
partir
studies
de entrevistas,
where we looked
encuestas
at different interviews,
con
surveys
actores en varios niveles
with
involucrados en el
different
sistema
stakeholders,
alimentario y también con una encuesta online
and an
que
online
colecta
survey
informaciones de
that
actores
collects information of
en
different
147
actors
ciudades a nivel
in
de
147 cities
71
in 60 in 69 countries
Primero es
or 70,
importante
right?
hablar del concepto de
It's important
resiliencia,
to speak
porque es un
about
concepto
resilience,
que
the concept.
generalmente
It's a concept that
se
generally
generaliza como un concepto único,
is
pero
generalized as a unique concept,
un concepto que incluye varias capacidades,
and it's a
¿no?
concept that includes many
Capacidades de
capacities,
individuos, de
capacities
colectividades, de
of
ciudades y
individuals,
de
of
sistemas.
cities,
Primero para prevenir
of a group, collective group, to prevent
la prevención, entonces desarrollar capacidades para
and develop capacities
prevenir,
to
para
prevent
acciones
actions,
preventivas,
to
para
have preventive actions,
digamos, las consecuencias de
to
eventos
prevent consequence
climáticos,
of
anticipar
weather
entonces el
events,
tema de la
to
alerta temprana,
anticipate
alerta precoz, que es un
an
tema muy
early
importante
warning,
para
right? Which
informar a
is
tiempo,
it's all about this. It's about
prevenir acciones.
reporting on time to prevent
La
actions,
capacidad de absorber entonces el tema de
the capacity
responder
to absorb,
durante y después de los eventos
respond
críticos a
to the
través
critical
de
events
acciones
before and after,
de
right?
protección
Through
social, por
different
ejemplo.
social protection
La
actions, for example,
capacidad
capacity of
de adaptar, entonces
being able to
de hacer
adapt,
cambios repentinos en el
to
sistema
make
para
sudden
adaptarse,
changes
como
on the system to adapt,
identificar cadenas de abastecimientos
to
alternativas
identify
durante
different
una emergencia.
alternative supply
O,
chains in the face of an emergency,
finalmente transformar
or
el sistema, quiere decir
to
cambiar
transform the system, to change
el sistema, los medios de vida, las
the
cadenas de
system's
suministro
livelihood
y
or
pensar en
means
una
of
visión
support,
a
the
largo
supply
plazo.
chains, and to think about
Un
long-term
ejemplo muy interesante es
actions.
el ejemplo
Quite
de
interesting
Medellín,
example is
donde
the
se
example of Medellin,
puede
Colombia,
un
where
poco
we can see
identificar varias
where we focus on
vulnerabilidades,
identifying different
impactos y
vulnerabilities,
respuestas, ¿no?
impacts,
En los últimos
and
10 años,
responses. In the
el
last 10
aumento de
years,
inundaciones, de lluvias intensas,
the
de
increase
pandemias, de
of
sequías,
intense
están causando
rainfall, of flooding,
dificultades para los
also drought, are
agricultores
causing
para que
difficulties,
lleven los productos al
are
mercado.
hampering
Los
the
productores de
farmers
frutas,
from
sobre
taking their
todo
products out to the
en
markets,
zonas
even more fruits and
remotas o
vegetables in more remote
desregionadas,
areas from
sin
the
sus
urban
medios de
regions,
transporte,
a
no
bit
consiguen
remote
llevar
from urban
sus
regions,
productos
where
al
right without their
mercado.
means of transport,
Y
they're not
esto
able to
produce un
take
aumento de los
their food
precios
stuff to the
para los
wholesale, which
agricultores y también de más
thus
pérdidas de
turns into a
beneficio
price increase
y
and the
también
consumers and
más
more
precios
waste,
más altos
waste
a nivel de mercados.
and higher prices in the market.
La región de Antioquia tomó
And
medidas
the region
para
of
reducir
Antioquia in
este
Colombia
impacto a través de un
applied or
ajuste de
implemented some
mercados
measures to reduce
campesinos
this effects
para
through
conectar a
different
los productores y los consumidores,
farmers'
reducir
policies
las
to
pérdidas,
reduce food
reducir las
waste,
cadenas y
to
también
reduce the
reducir los
chains,
precios.
and to
Ese
reduce
es un ejemplo.
waste.
A
It's an
través de la
example.
encuesta global, pudimos
Through the global
claramente
survey, we
identificar
were able to clearly
cuáles son los
identify
principales choques que
the
afectan los sistemas
main
alimentarios.
shocks that
En primer
affect
lugar,
food
como
systems.
era de esperar,
In the first
la
place,
pandemia COVID-19 se
the
mostró como el primer
COVID-19 pandemic
shock que
was the first
afectó
shock
las varias ciudades. Pero también,
that affected many cities.
segundo lugar, los eventos económicos y climáticos
And in the second place, we've got
la
different
primera
weather events
preocupación
that
de
account for
de la
the first
gente
concern.
en las ciudades. los eventos
of
económicos
people in
también son una
cities. The
consecuencia
financial or economic events are
grave
also
de
a
los eventos
consequence
como
of
la
other
pandemia
events,
y la
such
sequía.
as the pandemic and different climatic and weather events.
Siempre en Medellín se puede también ver que
In the Medellin
a partir
example, we're
de
also able
en
to
los
see
últimos
that
20 años
in the
una
last 20
serie de varios
years,
eventos
there's been a
se
series
sumaron
of
y
events
eso es el tema principal porque
that have been
cuando se
that have
habla
been added
de
to this
eventos
set of events, right? Because when
críticos
we talk about
es
critical
importante
events,
ver que muchos
it's
eventos se
important to
suman a
see
otros. Se habla
that there are
de
initial events that
convulsiones y choques,
are
pero
added
se
to
puede
other
hablar
events, right? We
también
talk
de
about shocks,
afectaciones
disturbances, but
que son
also
eventos más
some
a largo plazo
events
que
that are
afectan
more long-term
gravemente el
that
sistema alimentario.
gradually affect
Y como se
our
puede
food
ver
system.
en Medellín hubo varios que se han
As you can see
sumado
in Medellin, there's many
y han
events
aumentado el impacto de la vulnerabilidad en el sistema
that have
alimentario.
increased
En temas
vulnerability in
de
the
choques
food systems.
climáticos,
Now,
se puede ver también
climate
a nivel
shocks or
global
events can also be seen at a
no,
global level,
que
right?
que los choques
We
no tuvieron
see
la
that
misma,
shocks
el mismo impacto
did not have
en todos
did
los
not
países.
impact as
Hay
much,
países,
right?
por ejemplo, a
In
economías
all
más
countries didn't
pobres,
have the
más
same impact
bajas,
in all the countries. For example, in
hubo más impacto
poor economies, there was more
en comparación
impact
a países con economías
when
alto
compared
ingreso,
to
que
countries with high
se pueden
income
beneficiar también de una mayor
revenue, right?
capacidad de
Which
recuperación
could
y
in
también de
turn
márgenes de maniobra financiera. Eh,
have more
en temas de
flavor
respuestas,
and recover
podemos
faster.
notar que la
In terms of
mayoría
collective responses, we can see that
de
most
las respuestas son focalizadas en temas de catástrofe
responses are
social y
focused on social
emergencia.
protection
Y
and emergencies,
como una respuesta para reforzar la capacidad de
i.e., this is a
absorber
response
los
to
eventos,
reinforce the capacity to
pero
absorb
siguen trascurando
shocks.
bastante otras formas de resiliencias, como la
There's
prevención,
other ways of
el
resilience
cambio
like
y también la
prevention
transformación.
and
Se puede notar
transformation.
también una eficaz coordinación entre
We
varios
also saw an
niveles de
efficient
gobierno, ¿no?
coordination between different levels of
Gobiernos
government,
nacionales y gobiernos locales.
between
Y la
national and
mayoría de las
local
respuestas
governments,
fueron a nivel nacionales.
and most responses were
Aún
at a
las
national
respuestas de
level,
gobiernos locales fueron muy eficaces y
despite
fueron
the fact that local government's responses were
involucrando
actually quite efficient. They started, that they were, increased
en
or
términos
engaged community, but they were
desafíos,
quite limited. Now, in terms of
como ya
challenges,
mencioné,
as I mentioned
las respuestas se
before,
focalizaron en el tema de la absorción,
responses were focused
absorber
on absorption,
el
right?
impacto
Absorbing
de eventos
the
críticos,
impact of
más
critical
que
events
pensar en la prevención, la
more
anticipación y
than
la
thinking
adaptación y la
about
transformación.
prevention, anticipation, adaptation, and
Hay
transformation.
también tema de limitación de recursos, sobre
There's
todo en
also
los
a
recursos de
resource
las autoridades
limitation,
locales.
limitation of resources for local
Falta de
governments for the most
delegación de
part.
responsabilidad
We've got
y también
uh,
iniciativas
much
de
transfer of
arriba hacia
responsibility
abajo,
and initiatives that from a top-down
más que
approach,
abajo hacia arriba.
that they're more from a top-down
Tal
approach
vez,
than the other way around, right?
una
And
falta
bottoms up.
de
Maybe there's
locales.
also a lack
Las
local
iniciativas se
specificities.
concentraron sobre todo
Initiatives
de
were
manera
concentrated
bastante general. Em,
in a quite general
ejemplos
manner.
positivos son siempre de Medellín,
Positive
hubo
examples or
iniciativas como el
examples from
proyecto
Medellin,
SABA,
we had initiatives
liderado por
like
la
the Saba
gobernación
project
de
and
Antioquia, que
Antioquia
apuntaba a reforzar la comercialización
governance,
entre
which sought
productores y
to
consumidores,
improve the trading between
reduciendo
producers and
las cadenas alimentarias,
consumers,
facilitando la
reducing the
cooperación
food
entre
chain,
productores y consumidores. Eso fue muy importante,
facilitating
sobre todo durante la
between
pandemia.
consumers and
La
producers. That
asociación
was very important
Abaco
in the pandemic.
ha fomentado bancos de
The association
alimentos
that has
por
fostered the creation of
recuperar
food banks.
la comida que
Babaco
no se
has
puede
done this
vender en los mercados y
to recover all the food that
estableciendo
cannot be sold in the markets.
bancos de
They've
alimentos
recovered all this
para
food and they created food banks
en cantinas populares, por ejemplo. La iniciativa
for
Comer es una iniciativa que
having
mira a
these
reforzar los
popular
enlaces entre las
diners.
comunidades rurales y
We've also
urbanas de
got another
Medellín.
initiative,
Eso
which is Comer, a
permitió
connection between rural
reforzar una visión
Medellin
territorial
and
de
collective
la
actions to
alimentación.
improve production and local
En
consumption
temas de
and agri-food systems.
recomendaciones, es importante
In matters of
renovar un
recommendations,
poco
it's a good idea
programas de protección
to
social,
have these programs of
programas más
social
innovadores
protection.
more innovative
procesos mejorados de seguimiento.
processes that have better follow-up in processes and monitoring. It's important to invest in
reforzando las cadenas
production
locales
and
verticales,
diversification,
también
invest
diferenciando
in local markets
en
and also
cadenas nacionales
national
importaciones y
chains or supply chains of imports and
invertimos en
exports
prácticas adaptadas al clima
in
también.
practices that are adapted to climate
Otro
change.
aspecto importante
And other
es la
important
infraestructura
aspects is
alimentaria,
the food infrastructure,
que debe ser más resistente al clima,
which
entonces
should be more
rutas más
resilient to
resistentes
climate,
a
markets,
inundaciones,
the routes that are
instalaciones
more
agrícolas
resistant to
modernas, infraestructura
flooding,
de sistemas
modern
alimentarios compartidos
infrastructure,
y
shared food
y un otro
agri-systems.
aspecto fundamental es
And another
invertir en
very
una
important
gobernanza
aspect is to invest in
planificación estratégica,
a
involucrando
governance and
varios
strategic
niveles a
planning,
nivel
which
doméstico,
involves various
nacional, local,
levels at the
sociedad civil
local, domestic level, civil
comunidad en
society,
general.
and
Entonces,
the
es muy
community at
importante para,
large. It is fundamental,
primero, integrar
firstly,
resiliencia en los
to
planes
integrate
de la
resilience
planificación del
in
sistema
the
alimentario y
planning of
también para
the agri-food systems,
compartir la información
and also
a
share
todos los
the
niveles de la
information at all levels of the population.
Concludendo,
To conclude,
es importante
it
pensar a la
is
resiliencia no
critical
solo
to consider
frente a un
resilience
shock
not
específico, pero
only
pensar
to face a
shocks
specific
múltiples que se
shock,
suman.
but there are
Entonces,
multiple
adoptar
shocks
una
that
visión más
are
sistémica
add-ons.
para responder a
So
los
to
shocks.
help systemically
Es
to
importante también
provide results
responder sí
from that
a
focus,
los
we need
shocks, pero
to
pensar a una
respond to
resiliencia
these
a largo plazo.
shocks, but also to have a
El objetivo
long-term resilience
no
plan.
es
The
volver a la
objective
normalidad,
is
pero
not
reconstruir
to
mejor los sistemas,
go back, but rather to have better
como decía,
built
a través de
systems.
un enfoque sistémico y
As I said, a
transformador.
systemic manner
Para
with the
concluir,
objective
es
of
importante
transforming the
fomentar una
agri-food
gobernanza
system. It's
multinivel,
important to promote a
desarrollar
multi-level
capacidades
governance,
y favorecer el acceso a
capacity
las finanzas
building,
para los
and
gobiernos locales.
access to local
Bueno,
services
concluyo
by
también mostrando
finances,
un
finance
manual que
services. I would also
desarrollamos
like to
disponible
illustrate
en
to you this
nuestro
manual that
sitio,
was put
donde
together,
se puede
and it
destacar
is
una
available on
herramienta en
our
línea para
website. You
apoyar a
can
las ciudades
download it to
en
support
analizar el
the
sistema
cities
alimentario y
to
planificar,
analyze
planear
the food system
la
and to
resiliencia
plan
a los choques múltiples.
the
Concluyo así que
resilience to multiple
ambas atención.
shocks. And that would be it. Thank you very much for your
Muchas gracias,
attention.
Guido. Mira, tenemos
Thank you very
minuto,
much,
11
Guido. We have
segundos
one
para una
moment,
pregunta muy
1 minute
concreta. Acabas
rather,
de hablar de la
for a
gobernanza
question.
multinivel.
You just
Yo creo
talked
que es de
about
mucho
this
interés
multi-level
para
governance,
las
which
ciudades que nos
provides a great deal
acompañan
of
y pues
interest
los
for all the
sectores
cities
públicos en
that
general.
are participating
¿Tienes
in
algún
public
ejemplo que
sector
puedas
in
compartir con
particular?
nosotros en
Do you
este
have an
minuto que nos
example you
queda
can share with
sobre
us in
cómo se
that
puede mejorar
minute
esa
we have left
perspectiva
to
de lo local
improve
y lo nacional?
that perspective from that which is local and that which is
Sí, gracias,
national?
Sara. Sí,
Yes, thank you,
yo creo
Sarah.
que primero, antes de
I
mostrar un
believe
ejemplo,
that
es
before I
importante
illustrate or
partir con
show you
unos
an example or
principios
case study,
generales
it's
que son
important to
esenciales
have
para
the
promover una
main
gobernanza
principles to
eficaz e
promote an
inclusiva.
effective,
Primero, es
inclusive
importante una
governance.
distribución
Firstly, it's
estratégica de
important
poder,
to have a
delegar
strategic
y definir bien
alliance
el
to
papel
well
de cada
distribute
uno.
the
Eso
role and
definitivamente
understand the
pasa
role that
y
each person has
lamentablemente
and plays.
no pasa
And
siempre.
unfortunately, this doesn't happen all the
También
time. Another aspect that's
importante es
important
fomentar la
is
confianza
to
entre varias
foster trust
instituciones
amongst
y
different
aumentar la
institutions
colaboración vertical y
and to
horizontal
have
entre varios niveles
a
de gobierno
horizontal
y
system
también
and vertical
varias
system through various institutions in the
instituciones a
government
nivel
and
urbano, periurbano
the
y rural.
urban and peri-urban
Y como
areas.
decía en mi presentación, el
And
intercambio
as I
de
said in my
información
presentation, there
y
should be
espacios
an
para
exchange
diálogo.
of
Eso
information and
principio es clave. Un
spaces
ejemplo
that are
interesante,
given to dialogue. This is very
lamentablemente no
important.
es de esa región,
Unfortunately,
pero es
this
de la
does not
ciudad
belong to the
de
region, but it
Chengdu
will
en China,
responds to a
donde
Chengdu
han
city
desarrollado un
in China,
sistema
where
muy
they have
importante
developed a very important
para
system
fomentar una gobernanza
to
inclusiva.
foster
Por
inclusive
ejemplo, en tema
governance.
de distribución estratégica de
For
poder,
example, the
han desarrollado un
strategic
plan de acción para
organization, they
garantizar
have an
abastecimiento
action plan
diario en
to
respuesta
supply on
a
a daily
pandemias a
basis
gran
a response to the pandemic at a large scale. That was a mechanism to make various institutions responsible and aware of the role they played. In terms of collaboration, both vertical and horizontal one, development in trans-regional policies of green channels that guaranteed the continuous flow of products. This is very effective to ensure food supply locally. Chengdu also developed a follow-up process to share information on the prices of markets with the entire population. These are three very significant aspects to promote an effective and inclusive governance. Thank you very much, Guido, for that concept and information. We have a great deal. Please stay on because we have a great deal to talk about. The region has been tackled by extraordinary challenges faced by more vulnerable population. One of the effects has been seen by Rio Grande do Sul a few months ago. To tackle this matter, we have invited Marison Melo, who is the head of international relations consultancy of CONAB. Mr. Melo Marinho, given the recent effects of Brazil, where more than 400 municipalities have been involved in climate emergency, what has been the response of the government to reestablish the food supply? Please, the floor is yours. Hello, good morning to each and every one of you. I am delighted to be in this webinar. I would like to thank you for your invitation. The work that has been put together by CONAB, it has a very important role in Brazil to organize public policies for the supply and operational aspects of this food chain. I will begin by sharing a presentation so you can better understand what is taking place in Rio Grande do Sul. You will get an idea of what happened in that state. As I said, the national company linked to a supply is a public company or organization linked to all these different states. We have in green all the states where we are. The red dots refer to the distributors. And the first layer, you can see the local production, which is the climate disaster, which was in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. We have a regional superintendency. In this case, and based on the presentation I will give, it's going to be referring to this area of Rio Grande do Sul. You can see the capital of the state here. It's a metropolitan region with a high level of population density. And here we have a relay area, which was on the south. So this is the area of Rio Grande do Sul. I'm sorry, I have a bad connection with audio. I'm not able to visualize. I think I'm going to try to clarify this. We have a very important hydrological area in the south. You can observe here the area of the metropolitan region of Porto Alegre. CONAB is a company that works with information We have a mapping of Rio Grande do Sul. The areas are based on the climate crisis that was extensively affected. This is a hydrological image, which is the place where I showed you previously. Here you have a meteorological hydric area that goes to Puerto Alegre. You can see the pluviometers, which registered in certain regions 150 million millimeters. Given that the amount of rainfall was you can see the average between 12 to 18 millimeters. Your presentation is very good, but your audio is very bad. So I would suggest to improve your audio or begin with the next presentation, and then we'll take you on later. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. So we're going to continue.
Tranquilo, sem problema.
Muy bien.
No
Bueno,
worries.
muchas gracias. Sí, vamos a dar
Thank you very much.
para que Marisol
So we're going to wait a few minutes so that Marisol can improve his audio, because he's providing very valuable information. And we're going to continue with the order. So we have a very important standpoint from FAO. FAO has a great deal of experience in programs in that which relates to emergencies. And we have invited Angela Blanco, who comes from the regional office, to provide us with information from the standpoint of FAO in its role in emergencies. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning, dear authorities, panelists, and participants. Can you confirm if you can see my presentation?
Sí, perfecto.
Yes, we can. It is a delight for me to be with you today on resilience on food systems in intermediate cities in order to share some of the experiences of vis-a-vis emergencies in our region and Latin America and the Caribbean, where its objective is to increase the resilience, livelihoods, and food systems vis-a-vis threats and shocks. Sorry, Sarah, we're not seeing your presentation. If you can open it.
No, solo te vemos a ti.
We only see you. Can you?
Ay, qué raro, porque antes la prueba funcionó y a mí me dice que estoy compartiendo.
And it does show me that I'm sharing. I'll stop sharing and initiate. Just give me a second, please.
A ver. Trato de nuevo. ¿Ahí la están viendo?
No, estamos viendo. Ahí sí. Ahora creo que sí ya está.
Now we can see it. Now we can see it. Yes. Yes, on full screen. Yes.
Sí. Perfecto.
Yes.
Guido me dice
Okay,
que sí con la
perfect.
cabeza, así que
Yeah.
entiendo que
So
sí.
I understand that you are. Okay, super.
Bueno,
So
¿por qué de la importancia del
So why is it important on the work that FAO does in the emergencies in this region is very important because it's highly vulnerable and exposed to disasters. It's the second region in the world to be more exposed below Asia and the Asia Pacific. There were more than 1,500 adverse effects that affected people in 2003. 23% of disasters occurred in Latin America and the Caribbean, and this area is profoundly interrelated and involved with the impacts of El Niño and other recent impacts in the region. In 2023, FAO published a report on disasters which sets forth that 23% of damages and losses occurred on agriculture, and 65% of the losses were taking place in this sector. The productive aspects are very vulnerable to extremes, could interrupt this food supply and putting at risk the food safety and nutrition, of course. In this region, as the regional director stated, are translated in the reduction of 975 calories per capita. With a higher intensity and recurrence of the extremes in climate change and the effects, the fragile aspects, the work that FAO does to improve the capacity to anticipate and have a fast response and generate resilience, of course, is the information to provide the support of subsistence of the different homes in order to support resilience. So FAO contributes to all these efforts through the generation of key data, which is fundamental for decision-making, anticipation, and response. Through systems like DM, which is the information data for emergency by FAO, they analyze the extreme process and the livelihoods and agricultural production in communities and areas that are in exposed areas and with high levels of vulnerability. We also provide information by carrying out impact analysis immediately during the event. FAO also provides assessments that are more prospective, which allow us to identify and generate alerts in areas where food safety would be an issue given the various related factors like extreme climate variabilities and other crushes and crisis, conflict, violence, and economy. A few weeks ago, for example, as a response to the Hurricane Beryl, FAO carried out a pre-disaster satellite image using state-of-the-art technology with the information that was generated from the community on site. This information allowed us to provide the focalization on fast responses by various players from government, country, and sub-regional levels in order to anticipate key aspects in this initial response stage. FAO also supports the generation of information for prospective decision-making processes. In the Caribbean, in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, FAO had already been supporting the Ministry of Agriculture to generate analysis data, and with the participative involvement, we reduced risks and natural resources. The images that you see is the basic fishing organization, and you can see the impact of the hurricane by having this previous information and also to carry out risk implementation analysis and response. FAO implements, therefore, anticipative action activated by an alert to mitigate impacts with the support of the development of crisis calendars, of trigger aspect for anticipatory aspects in plans and protocols. It also strengthens at the regional region the exchange planning on an annual basis on this agenda, pushing this agenda in the region. We plan from the prognosis and predictive analysis in order to have a
clave para la protección del
foresight in the
cultivo del
protection
ganado, de
of
los
the
activos,
crops,
de las infraestructuras
livestock,
productivas, a la
infrastructure,
vez que se garantiza la
and at the same
disponibilidad de
time
alimentos.
guaranteeing the
FAO,
availability
junto con
of
otros
food.
socios, ha
FAO with
apoyado ya
other
el
partners have
establecimiento de
already
18
supported the
marcos de acción
establishment of
anticipatoria en la
18
región.
anticipatory
Desde finales del año
frameworks.
pasado, por
As of
ejemplo,
last year,
utilizando estos modelos,
using these
FAO, junto
models,
con gobiernos y
FAO
otros
with the
socios, ha
government and
implementado
other
programas de
partners
acciones
have
anticipatorias frente
set
al
forth
Niño en 8
programs
países.
vis-a-vis El
FAO
Niño in
cuenta
8
con
countries.
evidencia de cómo estas
FAO
acciones
has
han repercutido
evidence
en la reducción
how
de las
this has
pérdidas, la
resulted
disminución de la
in the
mortalidad en mar,
reduction of loss
la
and the
reducción de
reduction
las
of
medidas de
loss of
afectamiento
animals,
negativas
livestock,
de las familias,
and
asegurando
the
así la
livelihood of families,
disponibilidad de
ensuring the
alimentos
availability
e
of
impactando
food
positivamente en las
and also
economías locales.
positively supporting local economies.
FAO de manera continua apoya el fortalecimiento de la resiliencia. Por mencionar algunas de las
FAO
acciones
supports
clave,
resilience. To mention some of the
cursos y
key
capacitaciones
actions,
que han
courses, and
alcanzado
trainings
a
we've
más de
done,
1.300 personas
reaching more
en
than
dirección de
1,300
entrega
people
directa.
in the region
También
directly.
está avanzando en la
We're also
el
advancing
fortalecimiento de la
on
resiliencia y la gestión de
strengthening
riesgos
resilience and
antiincendios
risk
en el
management,
sector de
fire
pesca
suppression,
y el
risk management, right?
fortalecimiento de los
And
enfoques
also on fishing
salud.
and on
A través de
strengthening
estos
the health
programas innovadores,
approaches through
FAO
these innovative
ha
programs. The
apoyado a
FAO
gobiernos
has
locales y
supported
municipios para
local
fortalecer
governments and
resiliencia
municipalities to
frente a sequía,
strengthen resilience
inundaciones,
in the
incendios,
face of
erupciones
droughts,
volcánicas,
floods, forest
huracanes,
fires, and
plagas y
volcano
enfermedades de los
eruptions,
animales, entre otras. Por ejemplo,
hurricanes,
a través del programa
animal diseases,
regional para
etc. For example,
fortalecer
through
la
the regional program to
resiliencia para la
strengthen
recuperación a
resilience
COVID,
for the
FAO benefició
recovery
de
in the face
manera
of COVID, the
directa a
FAO
61
directly benefited more
municipios en
than
4
61
países.
municipalities in 4 different
También
countries.
apoyamos la preparación y la
We also
respuesta a
support
emergencias
the
vinculadas con la
preparedness, emergency
sanidad
preparedness
animal y
and
vegetal,
support linked
el
with
impacto de
the
los extremos
animal and vegetable
climáticos y el
health, right?
contexto
The
de crisis
impact
política.
of weather
Esto,
events and
la
also
generación de datos
crises.
de impacto y
This
análisis de
is with
necesidades
the
permite, con
need
información clara,
review and analysis of our
implementar
needs,
acciones rápidas
impact
para
analysis. We're able
rehabilitar
to
la
implement rapid
producción
actions
y
to
los medios de vida, sobre
rehabilitate
todo en
production
aquellos
and means of
contextos de
support
alta
livelihoods in
vulnerabilidad.
those contexts, even more in those contexts of high
En
vulnerability.
2023,
In 2023,
4.476.000 personas se beneficiaron de manera
466,000 people
directa
were
por estas
benefited directly
intervenciones y más de
by these
130.000
interventions, and more than
personas
130,000 people
fortalecieron sus capacidades en respuesta a emergencias y
strengthened their
resiliencia.
capacities in
Este
response to
trabajo ha
emergency
sido
and
posible
resilience.
gracias
This
a las
work
alianzas
has
estratégicas
been
con el sector
possible thanks to
público
the
a nivel
strategic
local,
alliances
a
and
nivel
partnerships
nacional,
with
a
the
nivel
public
subregional,
sector at a
pero
local,
también gracias a las
regional, and
contribuciones de los
subnational
socios de
level, and
recursos,
also thanks to the
incluyendo
contributions
la Unión
of
Europea,
resource partners,
cooperaciones
including the
bilaterales,
European
el
Union's
gobierno de
bilateral
Canadá, entre
corporations, the
otros.
government of
Los
Canada, among
desafíos
others.
siguen siendo importantes, por lo que es
We still
crucial
have
que
significant challenges,
continuemos
therefore it's crucial
incrementando
to
los
continue
esfuerzos para
increasing
mejorar
all our
nuestra
efforts
capacidad
to
para
improve our
anticiparnos,
capacity
actuar con
to
rapidez y crear
anticipate,
resiliencia a largo
act
plazo.
rapidly, and
Todo lo
create
anterior
long-term
teniendo
resilience.
muy presentes las brechas y las
Of
necesidades
course, considering the
diferenciadas
gap and the
de las
differentiated
poblaciones
needs
potencialmente
of
afectadas,
potentially
especialmente
affected
aquellas que se encuentran
populations,
en mayor
especially
situación
those
de
that
vulnerabilidad.
are in
Y esto
that
para
present
evitar
higher vulnerability
represalias.
rates, in order not to
Cierro
leave anyone
agradeciendo
behind.
nuevamente la
I'd like to
oportunidad
conclude
de
by
participar en
thanking
este diálogo y reiterando
again
el
this
compromiso de
opportunity,
FAO
thanking
para
you
continuar
for
trabajando en estas
inviting me to
importantes
this discussion,
estrategias
and I'd like to
para
thank the
avanzar
FAO.
hacia sistemas
And we must
alimentarios
continue
más
working on this
sostenibles,
to advance
inclusivos y
to have
resilientes
more
en América
inclusive
Latina y el
resilience and
Caribe.
sustainable
Muchas gracias.
food systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a ti, Ángela, por estos importantes mensajes.
Thank you
Y
very much,
bueno,
Angela,
parece
for
que ya
all
hemos
these important
establecido
messages.
bien la
And
comunicación con
it
Alison
seems
para que
like we've
podamos
established
continuar.
our
Solamente
communication with
recordarle a toda nuestra
our
audiencia
speaker now,
que
so we can
este
continue. I'd like
webinar
to
cuenta con
remind
interpretación
our
de inglés,
audience that
español y
this
portugués para que
webinar's got
seleccionen el
interpretation
canal
into
que sea de
English,
su
Spanish, and
preferencia. Sí,
Portuguese.
adelante,
Please
Mauricio, por
choose
favor.
your preferred channel.
Continuamos.
So
Tá bien, gracias.
the floor is
Muito obrigado.
yours,
Perdão
Harrison.
pelos problemas que tivemos aí nas conexões.
Okay, thank
Vou
you very much.
retomar da
My
onde
apologies for the
tinha
connections and the
parado
problems.
para ganhar tempo. Bom, eu estava falando sobre a nossa
I
regime
was
de chuvas que
speaking
tivemos na região e isso ocasionou
about
uma área extensa de
our
alagamento.
regime,
Essa área aqui é uma imagem de satélite
which generated
após o início e a consolidação desse alagamento. né, numa região do Rio Grande do Sul
consolidation.
que eu já apresentei para vocês, a região de Porto Alegre, né?
And
Na verdade, a depressão central, que a gente chama no Rio Grande do Sul, que é uma região muito ampla que recebe todas as águas de 2/3, a estimativa de 2/3 da região do Rio Grande do Sul. A gente também, uma identificação de áreas alagadas cruzando com as lavouras de arroz, com as áreas cultivadas de arroz e soja na várzea, né, na parte mais baixa dos rios.
we
A
see
Conab
rice
faz a
and soy in the
estimativa e
lowest
faz
part of the
esses
rivers here.
levantamentos, como vocês podem ver,
Conab has
em
an
azul aqui
average.
são áreas mapeadas de soja,
And
e em
the record,
verde
as you can see
as
in
áreas de
blue,
arroz.
are the
A
areas that got
estimativa
soy.
é
And in
que
green, we've
a
got
crise
the
só não foi pior, porque
areas of rice,
nessa
the
época
different
a
rice
estimativa
crops and the
colhida em
estimated
torno
area.
de 80%, 90% das
It
lavouras,
wasn't that they
e
already have
mesmo assim
harvested 80 or
não
90% of
tinham
the
sido
rice
colhidos
in the
36 mil
plantation, but
hectares de
still
arroz e 47 mil hectares de soja, né? E
they
uma
hadn't
perda
done
estimada de 150
63,000
mil toneladas
hectares
de
of
arroz, uma
rice
perda
and
estimada de soja de
47,000 of
273 mil toneladas
soy,
de soja, que
with
ficaram nas lavouras
production
e
of
aqui, como eu falei, só não foi
270,000
pior
tons of
porque o
soy
ciclo dessas culturas de
that
verão e
were
maio, quando a
left
gente
out
foi
there in the
influenciado por essa crise,
crop.
já haviam sido colhidas. Aqui mais umas imagens que a gente trabalha também. Na verdade, a Conab tem como missão
Here we've got some
mapear também os
images
silos
we
armazenadores.
work with.
E aqui nessa
Conab has as a
imagem a
mission
gente consegue
to be able
ver
to gather
os pontinhos pretos são os
this
silos de armazenagem
information
cadastrados pela Conab. E
and this
acontece o
data
seguinte, o que
that
que a gente
lets you
tem que
map.
fazer também? Como
On
arroz já
black,
estava
we've
colhido,
got
a
the
soja já estava
storage
colhida,
silos.
a missão da Conab foi
Conab,
tentar
we need to
identificar
do, but
quando
since the
que foi
rice
essa
was already
perda
harvested and the
em
soy was already
armazenagem,
harvested, Conab's
né?
mission
Então
was
a gente
to
pegou e mapeamos os silos que
identify how
estavam
much
pelas regiões, e
loss
aqui nessa imagem é possível ver
we had in
em
storage.
branco
We did
alguns silos
some
que
mapping of the
foram
silos of the
alagados.
regions.
Então já
We
tinham
were able to
produtos
see,
armazenados à colheita da
and
safra
in
de verão
white, we've got some
e foram
silos
atingidos
that had some products
pela
stored
enchente, pelas chuvas. Aqui mais uma imagem de uma
by the
capacidade
summer harvest and they were affected by
com
rain
54
and
unidades
flooding.
armazenadoras
Here
atingidas
we can
pelas
see we had
enchentes, uma
54
capacidade total de
units, storage
884
units,
mil toneladas, né? Uma capacidade
affected
de
by
8,7%
floods, a capacity
da
of
capacidade de armazenamento
884.7
no Rio Grande do Sul. E de arroz,
thousand
374 mil
tons out
toneladas,
of the capacity
42,3% das
of
unidades atingidas.
2.7%
Então, é uma área que
of
bastante
Rio Grande do Sul,
importante
and with
para
the
armazenamento
numbers
dessa
you see
cultura de
on
arroz.
rice, right, on
Então, vocês
screen.
podem
This
ver
is
que
quite significant for
foi
storing
bem complicado, né? Aqui a gente pegou uma
rice.
imagem, aqui é o Rio Jacuí, aquele rio que
You can see
passa no
this was a
centro do
quite
estado do Rio Grande do
complicated
Sul, que
manner
capta todas as
or
águas,
matter. Here we
e uma
have
imagem do Google Earth,
River
e
Chacoí,
aqui
which
uma
goes through
imagem
Rio Grande
durante
do
o
Sul and it
alagamento, né?
captures
Um
all
armazém numa
waters in
região
a
Pantano
Google
Grande,
Earth image, and we can
com
see
mais ou
images
menos
in the
5 mil
flood
toneladas de arroz armazenado que foi
in
atingido
Pantano
pelas
Grande in the
enchentes, pelos
region with
alagamentos. Aqui uma
25,000
outra
tons
imagem
of rice that
mostrando
were
na região metropolitana de Porto
stored,
Alegre,
right?
vocês conseguem
Tons
ver
of
onde é que ele
rice that
está,
were
né? Aqui é a
affected by the
região do
floods.
município de
Here we have a
Canoas, que
silo,
foi
the
fortemente
metropolitan
atingido
region of
pelas
Puerto
enchentes.
Alegre. It's a
Vocês vão
municipality of
perceber aqui nessa
Canoa,
imagem um pouco mais aproximada,
strongly
é
affected
uma
by
imagem lateral do
floods.
dia da enchente,
Here we
e
can
os silos não
see
aguentaram,
zoom
não tiveram
in to the
resistência e
flood,
acabaram estourando, né? E a perda foi de 100 mil toneladas de
and
soja.
there were some matters that
Cima o
the
mapa da
harvest
região de
exploded. They
Lajeado,
did not
Estrela
resist, and it was
e
the loss
Vale
of
do Rio
100,000
Taquari, que é
tons
um dos
of
principais
soy.
afluentes do Rio Jacuí.
Here we can
Aqui
see
vocês
River
conseguem ver a
Taquari,
imagem, né,
an image of
de
it. It's
aquela
one of the
região que
main
nesse momento
arms
existe
of River
capacidade de
Afluí. We can see an
captação de água.
image,
Aqui
the
uma
region of
imagem
a
na
high
área, né,
collection
do
of
Rio
water
Taquari, aqui é a cidade de
that I showed
Lajeado,
you
aqui cidade de
before.
Estrela.
Here
Aqui
we
você
have
observa uma
an
unidade
earth image
armazenadora
of
da empresa
Taquari.
Tec, que é uma empresa de rações que recebe muito produto.
Here
E aqui no
you
dia
can see the storage.
do alagamento que ela
We
foi
received many
atingida,
products.
a capacidade dessa unidade 70 mil
Here we
toneladas
had
para
the
soja
flood,
e milho, já que
day
ela
of the
faz
flood,
a produção de ração, né?
affecting
Aqui uma outra imagem, a gente
thousands
consegue
of
ver aqui na
tons
parte de
of
baixo, né,
soy
o Rio
and
Jacuí novamente,
maize.
né? A região
Production
metropolitana
of
de Porto
food.
Alegre,
All that
que é
food is
altamente
for
atingido, as
animals that it
populações
affects
foram
them.
altamente atingidas pela chuva. E aqui a cerealista Rampinelli, que teve aí as unidades alagadas. Aqui a gente consegue ver a imagem das unidades alagadas, para vocês
Here
verem
we
a
can
extensão
see
das áreas alagadas. E aqui uma imagem do jornal da região mostrando as perdas, né? Aqui na
the
região
images
central
of all
também,
these
vocês
units
podem ver essa área
affected,
verde na
flooded,
figura central aqui. São áreas de arroz,
green
e aqui durante os
areas, a
alagamentos, né,
central
que a gente consegue ver uma rodovia,
image.
e aqui na parte
Rice,
de baixo também as casas e as lavouras
we
alagadas.
can see a
Bom,
highway
de
here,
perdas em alimentação,
and the
para
bottom the
dizer,
houses.
a estimativa que teve uma perda aí de 13 mil suínos que morreram numa notícia do dia 20 de maio. Tivemos perdas na avicultura de 279 mil aves,
I'm
avaliada uma
sorry,
perda aí
the
de
audio's in and out, so I
450
cannot. We've
mil
got
dólares, né,
agriculture,
de perda,
the
galinhas
loss of
cordeiras, de ovos,
490,000
630 mil dólares de perda, e
million.
as genética e ovos férteis nas incubadoras em torno de 2,
This is in
2,3
dollars,
milhões
US
de dólares de
dollars.
perda. Além
Got
disso, a gente teve perdas
losses of
parciais, digamos
fertile
assim, né, de
eggs and
104 mil
genetics.
dólares de danos aí, pega a
You can
parte de
see
infraestrutura, de
also
prédios e
partial
tudo,
losses of
numa somatotal aí
$104,000
de
in
cerca de
damage.
70 mil dólares. No total,
Buildings, part
só
of infrastructure,
dessa
a total
avaliação
loss
nessa
of
conjuntura foram 23 milhões de dólares, né?
$770,000
Então é
only
muita dinheiro que foi perdido aí
on
nesse período. E
evaluation.
ainda assim também um mapa aqui sobre a logística, porque ficou muito
Here we see a
complicado para fazer
logistics map.
as ações, monitoramento, porque esses
It's
pontos
very
vermelhos
complicated
foram
for
tiveram as
monitoring.
interrupções das rodovias. Vejo que na região metropolitana de Porto Alegre ficou
Got the red
praticamente com uma
points
saída apenas pelo litoral em direção a Santa Catarina. Para o interior do estado
and the
havia um
highways.
isolamento também. Então o trabalho foi muito prejudicado no
They only
atendimento
had
às
the exit
vítimas.
through the coast
Por
towards
isso
Santa
que o
Catarina
Brasil
because
entrou
inside
junto
they
com
were
a
isolated. It was hard
Governo
work
Federal na questão de
caring for
auxílio
all
para as
these
Forças
victims. That's
Armadas,
why
Forças
the federal
Alimentares e
government of
próprias
Brazil,
regiões, para poder
they entered
atender a
quite
população
with the
atingida.
armed forces,
Aqui
helicopters
a
and
gente coloca
planes, quite armed
um pouco da ação da
to be able
Conab, digamos
to
assim, né?
comply and
Que
fulfill
atendeu aí com
and
cestas
to
básicas, então
comply
recebeu
with
o
all
modelo
the
das cestas com arroz, com
disasters there
óleo,
were.
enfim, com
Here we've got
alimentação e
CONAV.
doação para
We have a
municípios,
food
cozinhas emergenciais,
basket,
455
rice,
cozinhas
oil,
emergenciais, que foram as cozinhas
donation
que
to
prepararam comida para
municipalities.
as pessoas que estavam desabrigadas. Aí teve ações com os indígenas, né? A Fundação Nacional do Índio,
We have diners
pescadores,
that
quilombolas,
prepared food
povos de
for
matriz
people that
africana,
do
foram
not
doadas cestas para
have it.
prefeituras,
Got
assentamentos de
the
reforma
First
agrária,
Nations,
ciganos e o Ministério do Esporte para algumas para atletas. Então a gente foram doadas
got the Ministry
até
of
o dia 30 do
Sports.
6 quase 100 mil
For
cestas
some
básicas, aí, no
para-athletes,
valor
they
de
sent help.
2,7 milhões de dólares, né? Estão sendo adquiridas a todo momento. As cestas
So they
básicas
send this
continuam sendo
basic food
adquiridas, sendo
baskets
doadas,
with
né? Agora
primary
para as
food stuff.
famílias e para ainda existem pessoas
These
desabrigadas,
baskets,
né?
we
Com
continue
dois,
donating them to
três
different
meses depois
families. We still have
que o
people
isolamento
that
baixar, mas ainda está sendo feita muitas doações,
are
né?
homeless.
O
2
programa de aquisição de
months
alimentos e
after
medicina
the river
é um programa que
started
já foi retomado fortemente por esse governo. No Rio
losing
Grande do Sul,
water,
a gente tem
and
61 municípios com programas, né? Com o
we got
programa ativo,
PAA, a food
124
purchasing
cooperativas,
program in
5 mil
Rio Grande do
famílias
Sul
fornecedoras, né?
with
E
61
aí
municipalities,
a crise
124
climática fez com
cooperatives,
que as
5,000
entregas fossem
families
ampliadas e fossem
that
aceleradas, né?
supplied
Então,
all
até o momento,
this
por exemplo, eh,
food baskets. And
dos
the climate crisis,
17,5
the
milhões de
deliveries were
dólares
accelerated and
contratados já foram
extended.
entregues até
So
5 do 8, 14,
up to now,
perdão,
of the
hoje, 4 milhões de
17
dólares, né? É
million
mais de
higher, we
3,9
provided
mil toneladas de alimentos adquiridos
12.45
e entregues
million
nas populações vulneráveis.
deliveries of dollars
Esses
with more
processos
than
de PAE
3.9
são
thousand
anuais
tons
e
of
foram acelerados em
food
função
purchased
dos
and
agricultores
provided
que
to
não
all the
tiveram
vulnerable
perdas,
populations,
que
right?
conseguiram fazer
This
essa
was well
entrega para
accelerated
atendimento às
based on the
populações
farmers that did
atingidas
not
pela
have
catástrofe, né? Aqui depois a gente pode até deixar disponível
losses or that had
algumas
losses.
manchetes,
So
né? O boletim da Conab, a gente começou a fazer
here
estudos
we can
no caso de
see
perdas que foram
information of some
territorialistas, né? A questão das cestas
newspapers.
de alimentos,
And now
as
we
doações de cesta
conducted
para
some
famílias
studies in
emergenciais
case of loss
e o
of
trabalho que a gente
fruits,
fez como
herbs,
cálculo
donation of food
no
baskets for
impacto das chuvas
diners under
em frutas e hortaliças
emergency.
e também em
And we
grãos
also calculated
também
the
no Rio Grande do
impact of
Sul.
rainfall
Ainda para ir
in
finalizando, a
fruits,
ação do governo
herbs,
federal, ela envolveu
Rio
também
Grande do
medidas de
Sul
crédito, segurança alimentar, né, como a
for the
gente falou,
federal government.
defesa civil, saúde, né,
We
teve muitos
also had
casos
food
de
security,
doação
credit
a
measures,
Força Nacional do SUS,
civil
o
defense
Sistema Único de
investments,
Saúde do
health,
Brasil, que foi
many
inteiro,
donations we had
ofereceu
from the
atendimento às
national,
populações, reconstrução de rodovias,
the unique
segurança.
health system of
Infelizmente, é
Brazil.
uma
They
coisa que a gente
cared
tem que
for their
falar. Houveram muitos
population,
saques a supermercados, porque a
safety on the
população estava
roads.
desesperada, não ficou ali ilhada, muita
There's
gente sem acesso a
much
comida,
looting
mas
in
que
the
a ação do
supermarkets,
governo
right?
foi
The
importante
populations
para
were
tentar
in full
reconstituir
despair.
essa parte importante da
They
vida,
were
né,
not
que é a
backed up,
alimentação. Por isso que a Conab entrou bastante
did
com a
not have
doação
any
de
support.
cestas, né?
So
Defesa, né, institutos federais, justiça gratuita, auxílio reconstrução,
by
os
that's why there
programas
was
do
so
governo,
much donation
principalmente
of food
contínuos, também
baskets, of
tiveram
food.
muita ação
Those who
com
have
recursos
some
ação
legal
reflexos, né,
defense
3,1 bi. O
systems
total
here,
de
the
medidas de apoio
government
é 16,5
programs
bilhões de dólares
also
investido até o momento
anticipated 3.1 billion in terms of credit. The
amenizar os efeitos
support
da crise.
measures
Veja que esse
were
dinheiro aqui é um dinheiro
16.5
que
billion
ter sido investido
to
antes
reduce the effects of the
num período de
crisis.
10, 20 anos, a gente sabe que são medidas
If this money had
que
been
deveriam
invested
ser feitas a
before,
longo
it's 20
prazo, não é uma
years,
coisa
because
que
we
faça
know
de
these
imediato,
are
deveria ser
measures
evitado muitas
should be
mortes
created in the
assim
long term. It's
próximo,
not
por
something
exemplo, a
that
nós.
immediately occurs. If
Então,
that would
alguns
have
destaques, né?
done
Com
or
auxílio de
invested, we
$900
could
por
have
família para a
avoided
reconstrução das
200 deaths.
casas, os municípios faziam o cadastro. Tivemos 348 mil famílias
Here we have
aprovadas para receber
reconstruction
esse
help, $900 per family,
subsídio.
348,000
As
families
questões
approved
de
to receive that subsidy.
auxílio do trabalhador
We've also got
rural,
workers,
né, para empresas, o governo
assistance
federal
to
acabou
workers,
assaltando as empresas,
93,000
manter as empresas,
workers
porque as empresas ficaram 15, 20, 30 dias
that
fechadas
assumed
e não tinham como cumprir seus
to
compromissos, e o
keep
governo
their
veio fazer
jobs they
auxílio,
were
né, faz
closed
um auxílio,
for 15, 30 days. They
o
did
auxílio
not have any way to
parentalidade,
comply with the
foi pago para
commitments
mais de
and their
962 mil
salaries, wages,
beneficiários,
right?
né?
We
562
also
milhões
got
de dólares,
assistance
crédito
of
para as
more than
empresas, né? Mais de 1
562,000
bilhão para
beneficiaries,
29 mil empresas reconstruírem suas
credit for the companies, more
condições
than
de produzir
1
e
billion for
fazer
29,000
retomada, né, dos
companies,
trabalhos.
and
Os planos
reconstructing
da Defesa Civil totalizaram 144 milhões de dólares em recursos. Os
and
municípios
producing
atingidos
civil defense plans,
enviam planos para a
$144
sociedade
million
civil para
in
desenvolver a Defesa Civil.
resources.
A Defesa Civil
They also
aprova
sent
isso e a
plans,
construção de mais
civil
construção de
defense. Civil
11,5
defense approves this and
mil
builds.
moradias, né? Aqui tem alguns
Estimado
dashboards.
Mason, te invitamos ya para
Dear
ir
Marison,
finalizando para poder
Sim,
pasar
acho que é
al
o
let's
último
panel de
please
slide.
conversación.
start
Muy
concluding,
bien,
okay?
muchas gracias.
Okay,
Então,
thank
só
you.
para finalizar, tem um dashboard para acompanhamento, né?
To
Brasil unido pelo Rio
conclude,
Grande do Sul, é possível ver a
here we've got
execução
a
de antecipação
dashboard
de recursos,
for
prorrogação
follow-up
e tudo
execution of
mais.
Rio Grande do Sul.
Então, esse é uma ação
You can see all of our
brasileira, né, que a
resources,
gente
dates,
traz para
etc.
vocês,
This is an
diante de
action
uma
of the
realidade
Brazilian
muito
government
complicada, muito triste,
that
né, que
we
foi
bring to you within a quite
essa
complicated and
crise
unfortunate
climática
reality, which
que a gente
was
vivenciou lá no Rio
this
Grande do Sul,
climate and weather crisis
nesse mês de maio
we
de
were able to
2020, né?
overcome in Rio
Então,
Grande do
teve
Sul
danos muito
in
grandes, né? Vocês
May.
acompanharam na imprensa aí. E o governo federal e a Conab fez muita ação, e estamos fazendo ainda muita ação
We've
para
got the
tentar
federal
amenizar os
government, the
efeitos
media, and
dessa crise
CONAB. We're all
climática.
supporting. In we and CONAB, we're doing many
Nunca
things to
ocorreu, né,
reduce the
no Rio
effect
Grande do Sul
of
a
the
maior crise
climate and the
climática
weather
do
events and crisis.
Brasil,
This was
sem
never
dúvida nenhuma. Obrigado pelo espaço e
before
disposição.
seen. It's
Muchas
the greatest,
obrigada,
it's
Mason,
the
por la
largest
presentación.
event we've
Sí,
had.
la verdad que la situación es preocupante y bueno, justamente hoy estamos tratando de
Yes, it's a
conversar
concerning
y también
situation, and we're
identificar
trying to talk
soluciones
and to
creativas al
identify
respecto.
creative
Bueno, vamos
solutions for
a
this
seguir
purpose.
adelante.
Now,
Entonces, muchísimas gracias
let's
a
continue.
Guido,
Okay, thank you
Ángela,
very
Marison por
much
este
to Guido,
primer
Angela,
bloque de
Marison for this
presentaciones y
first
ahora vamos a pasar a un panel de
presentations
conversación
block. And now let's go to a conversation
sobre
panel.
respuesta coordinada del Estado
We're going to talk
nacional
about
y
the
local
coordinated
ante la
response
resiliencia
of the
alimentaria.
state
Este
nationally and
panel va a
locally
estar
for food
moderado
resilience, right?
por
This
Nicole
panel will
Kempicom
be
Taguchi, ella es oficial
moderated
de
by
Agricultura
Makikam Teguch,
de la División de
Agricultural
Producción
Officer of the
y
Division of
Protección
Production,
Vegetal de la FAO en Roma. Así que
Vegetable
Makiko,
Production and
adelante,
FAO
por
in
favor,
Rome,
tienes
right?
la palabra.
So please, the
Feliz
floor is
jueves.
yours. It's a pleasure to see you.
Muchísimas gracias, Sara, y es
Thank
un
you very
gran
much,
placer para
Sarah.
moderar
It's a
esta
great
sesión.
pleasure for
Y
me
para dar inicio al panel, haré
to moderate
una
this
breve
session. And to
introducción a los
begin this panel,
panelistas.
I'll briefly introduce
Como
the panel members,
representante
right?
de una autoridad nacional,
As a
nos
representative
acompaña
of
el
a national
ingeniero
authority, we've got
Kevin
here
Lagos,
the engineer
gerente de
Kevin
la Unidad de
Lagos,
Planeación y
the manager
Evaluación
of
de
the
la Gestión
Planning
de
and
Panasupro
Evaluation
en
Unit
Honduras,
for Panasupro
y como
Honduras,
autoridad de gobierno local y
and
representante
as an
de
authority of the
ciudades
local government
intermedias,
and the
ICTA,
representative of
tenemos
Red
a la
Ciudades
alcaldesa de
Intermedias,
la
or the
Comuna de Santa
Intermediate
Juana,
Cities
Chile,
Network. We've got
señora
the
Ana
mayor of
Albornoz.
Santa Juana, Chile,
Bienvenidos
Mrs.
a los dos.
Anna. Thank you and
Y tenemos la
welcome.
dinámica del panel consiste en
And
dos
the
rondas de
dynamics of the
preguntas donde
panel
nuestros invitados tendrán 5 minutos para
we'll have two
responder
questions and
a
we'll have
cada
5
uno.
minutes to respond to these
Lamentablemente
two
no creo que
questions, right?
tendremos
For
tiempo para
we
preguntas
had Anna Albornoz. Unfortunately, we
de
won't have
audiencia
time
después, pero por favor
for
dejemos
the
sus
public
preguntas en el
to
chat.
ask
Nuestros
questions, but
colegas
please write
estarán
your questions in the chat box, and our colleagues
siguiendo a los preguntas
will be
live chat.
following up on these
Entonces,
questions on the live
estimado
chat, okay?
ingeniero Lagos, la región
So,
centroamericana
estimated
sufrió las
engineering Lagos, the
protestas e
region, South
impactos
American region has
eventos
suffered the
climáticos severos.
different climates, severe
¿Cómo ha
climates
sido
and
el
weather
avance en
events, right?
relación a la alimentación por
What
parte
has
del
the
gobierno
response been
nacional
in
para
terms of the
apoyar a la
national government
población
to
afectada?
support
Por favor,
the
ingeniero.
affected population in terms of
Buenos
food and feeding
días
the population? Okay,
a todos.
good
Gracias
morning,
por la
everyone.
invitación al webinar.
Thank you very much for the invitation to
Pues
this
presento.
webinar.
Con
It's a
respecto
pleasure
a
to be
su
here.
pregunta,
Now,
pues,
regarding, or to answer your
nosotros
question,
como un país en vías de desarrollo, obviamente tenemos muchas oportunidades
we
de
as
mejora.
a developing country, Honduras,
Y
eyes on us, and we have made efforts. The central governments has been making efforts to progress. Nevertheless, we do need more coordination between institutions of the government to be able to provide an effective response, a better response to all the risks when we face all these type of problems. Of course,
como nosotros, en el caso de mi persona, como una institución del Estado,
as a
estamos
state institution
tratando de
and the one that I'm
adaptarnos
part
y
of, we're trying
vincularnos
to
con la
adapt
política de seguridad
and
alimentaria
link
y nutricional
to food
que
security and
se
nutritional
está con un horizonte a
policies.
2030,
And
pero
we've
obviamente
got
todavía
this is
nos
enforced
falta un
for
poco
a
de
2030
coordinación
horizon, but
para poder vincularnos
we're
todos
lacking
y
coordination to be
poder
able to
dar una mayor
link all
respuesta
institutions and to provide a greater response.
Muchas gracias, ingeniero.
Okay, thank you,
Eh,
engineer.
¿Quieres decir otra cosa?
I'm sorry, did you
Bueno,
want to add something?
Ok, no, por el momento sí. De igual
Ok,
manera tenía la
sí, sí,
presentación
sí,
para,
sí.
para demostrarla más
But I have a
Ya,
presentation.
gracias. Entonces, estimada alcaldesa Albornoz, en los
Dear Mayor
últimos tiempos
Albornoz,
la
in the
localidad
last
se ha
years,
visto expuesta a incendios
we
enormes
have
en
you've been
temperaturas.
exposed to
¿Cuál ha sido su
large extent
experiencia en
forest
coordinación con
fires. So what has been
entes
your experience in
nacionales
coordinating, Mrs.
locales
Ana
para
Albornoz, with the
responder a las
local
diversas demandas de la
entities
población
to respond to the
y
different
los sectores
demands of the population
afectados?
and the affected sectors?
Buenos días a todos y a todas. Es un honor para mí estar acá, sobre todo siendo una mujer rural de extrema ruralidad y de
It's
una
a
localidad de
delight to
extrema
be
pobreza
here
de
in
Chile.
the extreme
Ahora me tocó ser
poverty
alcaldesa
area
por un
of
periodo
Chile.
de 3 años,
I
fruto
am
de
the
esta
mayor for 3
pandemia,
years.
continúa con 3 mega incendios y
Pandemic,
ahora estamos en
three
funcionamiento ni siquiera
forest fires.
un mes
We have
libre
not
de
had
una
1 month
desde el
without a
nivel 4 o 5.
catastrophe from level
Entonces,
4 to
frente a
5.
eso,
Given
debo
that
contarles que, bueno, soy la primera abogada de
landscape,
mi comuna, que crecí
I
sin
am
luz
the
hasta los
first
14
lawyer
años,
in
que
the
soy
community,
originaria de un sector de extrema
and I
ruralidad
come
que no
from
tenía contacto ni
extreme
con el Estado ni
plurality
con los privados
that
y que
did
veía
not
de la
have a
necesidad
link
tanto
with the
nacional
state
como las
or the
multinacionales empezaron
rural
a
area,
plantar
as how
pinos y
multinationals
eucaliptus como
started to
cultivos y
plant
que antes de eso, según relataba mi
pine
abuela,
trees and
teníamos cultivos de
eucalyptus
cereales
trees
en el
with a
sector.
mono
Nosotros tenemos
crops.
alto analfabetismo, de privación
We have a
cultural
great
y
deal
incesto,
of
estadísticas muy extranjeras a nivel nacional.
illiteracy,
Somos una de las de territorio más
incest, and
grande y rico en
other
cuanto a geografía.
areas. This is a
El
very
impacto más
wealthy
grande en el
area
ritmo
with
de la región del
in its
Biobío y de Chile.
geography,
No
but in
tenemos
the
saneamiento
region
básico, no
of
tenemos sistema
Biobío,
de
we
transporte,
don't
hay
have a
una devastación
transportation
de
system.
total
We
abandono.
don't
No
have,
hay
there's a great
regulación del territorio
abandonment. There's no
tampoco. La barrera que
regulation of the
controla cuál
territory.
controlar
It belongs
suelo
to
público,
anyone.
pueden
People can
construir
do
casas
anything they
en lugares
want.
que
They
son
can
demasiado
plant, they can put
vulnerables,
houses
no hay
where it
presencia
might
ni
be
del Estado ni
incorrect.
de esas
There's
empresas
no presence
multinacionales.
whether
Así
of the
recibimos el
state
municipio
or of
y
the
reporte mega incendio forestal
scale
y luego
private
les
areas.
justifiqué,
This
gracias
is
a que
how I
ustedes estudiar
received the
derecho, que había un
municipality.
desplazamiento humanitario
There
en Santa
was a
Juana.
humanitarian
Nosotros teníamos una ciudad que empezó a
movement in
evacuarse en
Santa
temprano
Juana.
las zonas rurales porque había una
People
escasez hídrica tremenda.
went
Entonces vimos
to the
que
urban
esta
centers
multimática
because of a
interna,
drought. So the
esta
internal
sobrehumana
climate
naturaleza creada por
aspects,
el cambio
these
climático,
non-natural
hacía que la
aspects
gente se
created
iba y se
by
estaba
climate
mudando a las
change,
afueras
people
a
had
zonas
to
rurales
leave,
y se
schools
dejaba
were
de cultivar la
closed,
tierra. Entonces
and
descubrimos aquí en
we
pandemia y vimos que
assumed
había un
in the
problema de derechos
pandemic
humanos en
that
Santa
we
Juana
had
y en
issues
distintos
of
lugares en
human
general y en
rights
general en
and
Latinoamérica.
in Chile and
Y
also in Latin
en pandemia
America.
nos dimos cuenta que teníamos un
During the
valor. Y ese
pandemic,
valor
we
era que
realized
la
we had
concentración
a
tiene 33
value. A
comunas
region has
y las otras
33
32 comunas fueron a
communities,
comprarnos
and all
alimentos para
33
subsistentamiento.
communities
Nosotros
went to
no estábamos
purchase our
murmurando,
food.
estábamos
They
olvidados
went to ask
absolutamente.
us for
Y de
water.
repente yo dije, voy a hacer un
And
estudio
all
con
of
la
a
academia,
sudden,
con
I
la
carried
universidad.
out a
Y la
study with
universidad
the
regional nos descubrió
academic
que
sector.
nosotros
The
producíamos el
regional organization, we
26,7% de lo
produce
que consume agroecológicamente
36.7%
la
of
región del Biobío. No
agroecology
los cultivos que sean
consumption,
transgénicos ni que sean
not
importados, sino que
transgenics, not imported,
cultivos
but rather
climáticos que
crops
tienen relación con
that
la
were climate, that
autosuficiencia,
have
con la
to do with
soberanía, la
the
seguridad
area,
alimentaria y
with the
los vegetales.
sovereignty,
Como estábamos
with food
abandonados por el
safety, with
Estado, nosotros
organ. And
producíamos
because we
a
were
la manera
abandoned
nativa.
by the state, we
Entonces
produced in accordance to
vimos
old
que
traditions.
llegaron los incendios. Y al
So
llegar los
the
incendios teníamos
forest
esa misma
fires arrived.
situación. Y
We were
vimos
faced with the
que los
same
agricultores habían, por
situation.
supuesto, las tierras fértiles y los incendios aún
Where the fertile
enfrescan más
lands
el
were
follaje
taken
de los
away
cultivos,
when
el
there
agua
were
y la
fires, of
energía. Y
course,
teníamos
water
una
and energy.
inestabilidad económica
And we
tremenda.
had an
Entonces,
economic
¿qué hicimos?
instability that was
Y
extreme.
como no
So
teníamos a
what did
nadie,
we do?
estuvimos
Since
con
we
el
didn't
gobierno
have
del presidente
anyone to go
Piñera
to,
y
the
continuamos con el gobierno
government
del
of
presidente
Piñera,
Boric,
and then we
vimos
continued with the
que
Boric
no iba a llegar nadie a
administration,
Santa Juana y que
no
andar
one would help
presupuestando.
Santa
Entonces
Juana.
creamos una
and nobody cared. And we created a internal government. Imagine something that would make sense at an international level. I wanted you to understand that 15 people died. 75% of the largest community in Biobío region. Approximately 2,000 houses were burnt down. Large-scale livestock. This was in complete and absolute destruction. People of the rural area were asking us for water for their crops to protect their seeds, and they were asking for water for their livestock. We realized we had a power. The power was that our cosmovision that comes from the Mapuche indigenous people, the people that were abandoned by the private industry and by the state because we have a neoliberal economy in Chile, but everyone had abandoned it. They didn't care about the agriculture, the sovereignty, or food safety. But at the moment we had a catastrophe, we became useful. So what we did was visibilize our aspects in the media in order to create a public policy and a diagram of responses, always in the response and rehabilitations, because you cannot be concerned about productive promotion. The sustain agriculture is a human right, and you have to be concerned about the humanitarian aspect. This is life and resilience, which is the topic of this forum. So we created a planning and scheduling system with three politicians, military, people from the academy, and also the forestry organization, which is public and private. So we created a critical response program in agriculture. We had to create this program in the mutual response, so there was no one to support us. We had to organize ourselves amongst ourselves because the state was not present. We have to organize the communities. And because the multinationals were not there here, the main organization has to be with an internal strategy. We created critical operations, sovereignty, food safety. We have a line linked, for example, to aspects that are extremely important for small-scale local governance. For example, to have a vehicle with gasoline and so on. I am not in the community right now, and there are great gusts of winds right now. So the crops suffer and the greenhouses suffer, but we have to be constantly there, not only alert in the time of floods and winds or storms. We have an entire year of dedication. We have to improve what worked, what didn't work, and share it with other organizations. And to summarize and to not extend myself is to understand the clear rules and that everyone in it has a discipline. There are critical actions. You can be rehabilitating an agroecological area, but sometimes you need to use those resources for life. Or how do you include the ecosystem and so on. And there are various critical aspects that are extremely important to face resilience and people that do have resilience. And there are people that we have to have psychologists to support those people that need that support. Ancestral farming women have an enormous amount of resilience. We have to have cooperatives, which are extremely important. And what the President Boric is increased the funds. I am not from his political group. He allows us to help the communities, support them in public policies, as was done in Bolivia with the education. We can take advantage of our rural indigenous communities to create these schedules and designation of roles for each person so that all can continue creating and strengthening a social weaving of all the different organizations. And this is very interesting. Thank you very much. What you've said is very interesting. The coordination is fundamental without a doubt, but you have to be very clear roles and responsibilities that each person plays, the diversity of roles that this community has to play. I would like to go back to Kevin in order to provide him with additional time. I understand you have a short presentation to provide us with additional information on your program. Okay.
¿Pueden ver mi pantalla? ¿Sí? Ok, nosotros como en Honduras, ¿verdad?
In
Nosotros
Honduras,
representamos a Banasupro.
we
Quiero
represent
mostrarles la experiencia que
Banasupro.
tuvimos, en el 2020 en atención a
I
la
want to
emergencia
show you
por
what we
los huracanes
did
Eta y Iota.
as the hurricanes Eta and Iota in the year 2020, and how we provided emergency support. So we were coming, we were in a pandemic. The population was exiting that crisis, trying to reinsert themselves in the standard activities. And during 2020, we suffered the attack, if you will, with the two hurricanes. The first one was Eta. This was formed in the 31st of October and left the 13th of November, or dissipated. It had a very irregular path, Category 4, and then it became a tropical storm in Central America. Honduras is here. It had a path towards the Caribbean, and it reached the North Carolina coast in the U.S. On the right-hand side, you can see a better idea of the path that it has taken over Honduras. The impact of this hurricane provoked flooding, rainfall, extreme rainfall, and the effect that it had on many communities in the country was devastating. In 2000, when we were observed in 2020, there was a new hurricane that was being formed with a similar path, Hurricane Iota. It was more direct in the Honduras land. We have 18 departments, and all 18 departments were impacted by this hurricane. So I just want to show you some illustration of the impact of destroyed homes, destruction of infrastructure. At the bottom, you can see the international airport, the second most important city in Honduras. Was completely flooded, infrastructure destroyed. As far as crops are concerned, there was devastating damage. You can see the bananas, maize. All of this created an alert in the agri-food system, which was an impact of gigantic proportions. And taking on the report of the ECLAC, we have the primary population that was affected. Those are the ones that are directly impacted, 437,000 people. And indirectly, there were more people because of the closure, lack of communication. But just to have a context in figures, so what does this have to do with the institution that I represent today? The supplier of national basic products. We are an organization that belongs to the government. And the objective is to contribute to the economic and social well-being of the population at large, particularly in rural, depressed areas and urban centers. Supply products for basic consumption, ensuring quantity, quality, and reasonable prices that are competitive. The impact is we are we regulate prices to provide the regulated prices in the market, because we realize that by providing better prices, we are conditioning the private market. If there is a sales center, there is no inflation imposed upon them. Specifically, Banasupro are stores or locales where we provide products for the basic food basket. So what were the activities that we took place during the emergencies, given the hurricanes and storms that we were exposed to? The first activity that we did based on our action is to provide access of the products at these different centers, which were both physical and mobile. Because if we had a sales center where the population could access, the population particularly that had just undergone the exposure to these storms, had access to these products. And then you can also see that we had mobile centers through trucks. We have a coverage, we had a broader coverage because we visited the different locations where we didn't have access, so that the population could access food. The second activity that we carried out is the capacity at the country level as a government office to generate the food rations that's geared towards responding to emergency situations. Here you can see we generate and relate to the institutions that are in charge of distributing the help in the entire area of the nation wherever it's required. And then the third action is we carry out different coordination efforts. As far as emergencies, we work as a government with different institutions. I can mention COPECO, which is the contingency organization in charge of emergencies and providing technical support to people that are undergoing the emergency. We also had a direct relationship with the Secretariat of Economic Development of the nation office. Let's say, in order to process all these foods, we had to create a strategic alliance with large-scale producers of these products at the country level. Therefore, we needed the support of the Economic Development Office, which gathers and is in charge of all these producers in order to obtain the availability of the foodstuff. And we also linked our relationship with the social inclusion development office, which in this case, in an emergency such as this, we focused on the population of different areas of the nation. So there was a direct relationship with this office. And then to conclude, we had support with the armed forces of Honduras. They have a very positive reaction, and logistically their capacity is notable, and they were able to access a vulnerable population that were affected by the hurricanes. And to conclude, as far as lessons learned, we have two important ones. Honduras is a country that is highly vulnerable vis-a-vis these natural phenomena. Therefore, the interinstitutional coordination with the state, civil society, and cooperants is key to provide a response to the population that has been exposed to this. We have this coordination. We are still in the process of improving, but we have the first developments and in order to progress on these areas. Secondly, in order to improve the resilience of countries given these events, it's important to generate contingency plans, activity at various levels, identify different associated risks, and plan preventive activity and actions. I mentioned that as an institution, we are working to improve our operational capacity and our results as a nation. And I would also like to mention that it is also within our planning to create a system for public policies for supply and food trade. We're focused on this to continue growing as an institution and as a nation. With this, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much for this time.
Muchísimas
Good
gracias,
afternoon. Thank you
ingeniero
very
Lagos,
much,
y muchas gracias a la
Engineer
alcaldesa
Lagos and
Albornoz
the Mayor
compartir sus
Albornoz
valiosas
for sharing
experiencias.
your valuable experience.
Es muy claro que hay mucho
It's
más
very clear that
información
there's a
que
great deal of
compartir,
information that you
preguntas
want to
que quiero hacer,
share,
pero
and there are questions,
lamentablemente tengo que
but
pasar
unfortunately, I have to go
paso
to
final del
the
webinar con
next
el tiempo y paso
stage of this
para
webinar. So I would
Muchas
like to
gracias.
pass the word to Sarah.
Bueno,
to
muchísimas
conclude. Thank you
gracias.
very
Sí,
much.
bueno, hemos
Yes,
tenido estos elementos
we have had
tecnológicos que
these
preocupan. Muchas
technological
gracias por el panel,
elements
muy inspirador.
that has been
desafiantes las
very
experiencias que
inspiring
compartieron.
and
Esperemos
the
un poco
challenging
refrescarlas.
what you
Entonces,
were
vamos a ir
that we
mirando a
heard.
la última,
Now we're going to go
sesión del
to the
panel
last
de este
part
webinar.
of the panel of this webinar.
Queremos invitar a
We would
Rodrigo
like to invite
Perpetuo de
Rodrigo
ICLEI, América del Sur, y a
Perpetuo,
Joao Intini,
ICLEI,
que es el
Latin
Sistema
America,
Alimentarios de
Joao
FAO,
Inti,
América
which
Latina y
is
el
the
Caribe,
policy
un poco
officer
para
for
compartir sus
FAO,
reflexiones.
and to
Justo
share
verde.
his
Hace poco fue el
reflections.
Congreso Global de
Recently,
ICLEI, que
there
en
was
São
a,
Paulo, las
global
ciudades hablaron
conference in
mucho de
ICLEI
este
in Sao
tema,
Paulo.
un
There was a
lenguaje que
great deal
estuvo
of talk
presente en los diálogos, en
and
las
subjects
conversaciones,
and the
y
dialogues on
seguramente
this
que
topic. And
tienen mucho que
therefore,
compartir con nosotros
surely
en
you
esta
have a great deal
oportunidad
to
al
share with
respecto.
us at
Y
this
después, bueno,
opportunity.
la palabra a Joao,
And then the floor will be passed to Joao so he can allow us to have the closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and all our friends from FAO for the invitation for this space and for this programmatic alliance that we've got and partnership we've got, not only at a global level, but also in our region, America and the Caribbean. I'll now speak. I won't speak in Cervantes' beautiful language, but I'll talk about privileged Portuguese now, so I'll switch to it. So we've got a global Congress, right? An event that clear it gets this joins all this network local governments every couple of years. This last year in June we had around 1,500 participants. There was here with us actually 1,500 different countries. Around 120 were mayors, intendants, governors, etc., and different elected authorities. And the messages conveyed there are related to what we've spoken about before in this seminar. In addition to renewing our governance, and for the first time, we had a vice presidency in our region, the state secretary, Marizon from Rio Grande do Sul. Marjorie is now a global vice president of ICLEI. It's the first time that an authority from our region occupies this that position. We renewed our strategic vision of ICLEI until 2030. It's based on 5 different roads towards sustainable development: the road of carbon neutrality, circular development, resilience, nature-based solutions, and equitable development based on people. And regarding food systems, the renewal of the City Food Program, which is a global program of ICLEI for food systems, considering health as an integrating axis of the program. Therefore, there are three axes. We've got health as the integrating element of the program. Therefore, the program is based on healthy individuals, having healthy people. It's related to what we talked about before, right? The access to healthy food, and especially the access of those most vulnerable to it, healthy territory, healthy landscapes. We've got the element of resilience here in urban-rural thinking, which is key for our work, and to have healthy environments, weather. And we are relating this with food systems and carbon emissions and the perspective of resilience. The two global movements that were the most recent, FAO is highly engaged with the support of Eclair, and we have the insertion of food systems in the COP climate and weather conferences. In COP27, COP28, the food systems will be present in the COP15 of biodiversity in the Brazil COP. We're also preparing COP16 here in Cali, Colombia, considering all these agri-food systems, right? And why? And I'm going to talk about deers, yawns, there are almost 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions related to agricultural production, both in terms of use of soil, the use of water, and collateral activities, the use of energy for producing food and transport of this food for it to reach consumption centers. On the other hand side, we've got the field of biodiversity, where unfortunately we see agricultural production that's invading natural ecosystem, thus transforming them. Therefore, in terms of macro politics, the recommendation is hampering the conversion of those natural ecosystems for the production of food, and the joining of agroforestry systems where food production also has a role in production, preservation of biodiversity. The funding perspective, of course, is inherent to this movement. 9% of the global climate funding goes to adaptation, and only 3% reaches food systems. To conclude, that our challenge is gigantic. First of all, because we've got new competences from the two sides of our coin, right? The response when extreme weather events happen, like we saw here, what was mentioned by the mayor and our colleague Kevin from Honduras, we still lack capacities from the local authorities. That's why we need to foster networks, such as the intermediate cities network, working with all those capacities. We need them, right? We've also got the articulation between different levels of government. As an example, let's talk about the government of Brazil, who renews its national policies related to food systems, and it creates a program called Feed Cities, or Alimenta Ciudades, which will be fed by an enormous natural network where we click, and intermediate cities networks, all of that will contribute. Finally, we've got the contribution that Kevin has talked about, partnerships with the Urban Laboratory of Food Policies. In its 4th edition, it gathers 50 cities here in Brazil. It's a network. And we've also got the possibility of directly supporting cities and states in food conformity, which is the full response of a local authority to all those challenges of developing an integrated policy of circular, healthy, sustainable food systems. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to participate in this discussion again.
Muchas gracias, Sara.
Okay, thank you very
Muy buenos
much,
días a todos y
Sarah,
todas.
and
En verdad,
good morning,
un
everyone.
honor concluir esse webinário escutando as palavras de Rodrigo
I'm
Perpétuo,
going
representando
to
aqui a
give the closing
ICLE,
words for this
grande
seminar. We've
aliado
heard the
da
words of
FAO a
Rodrigo
nível
Perpetuo,
global e também a nível
representing ICLE,
latino-americano,
a great
brasileiro.
partner
Eu acho
at
que tudo que
Latin
será aqui
American and global
ressaltaram as
level.
grandes e
Brazilian, but
importantes
for the most part,
contribuições de todos que
I'd like
participaram deste
to
webinário.
talk about
Partilhos
the great
com o, na
contributions and
verdade,
efforts
o
of everyone
nosso
that
diretor
participated in this
regional,
webinar.
Mário Lubetkin. Em seguida,
Beginning with
escutamos
a regional
informações
director,
e
Mario Lubeca,
orientações
right?
muito
Then
importantes
we've
dos
heard
nossos equipes
information
de
and
FAO de la
quite
sede a
significant
partir do nosso
guidances
querido colega
and
Guido
orientations from our
Santini e aí
FAO
Guido,
group
temos largo caminho a
based
percorrer por aqui,
from our
seguramente
colleague
vamos
Guido
ter
Santini. We
outras
have a long road ahead, I
oportunidades de
think,
conversar
with
nesse tema.
security.
Também escutamos de uma
We
maneira
will have
muito
other opportunities to
organizada e
talk about this. We
importante
also
o
heard
que hace a FAO
in
nesses
an
momentos
organized manner,
quando se
which is
instalam
important, right? What the
estes
FAO is currently
desastres e essas
doing
situações todas críticas e como bem
when
disse
these
Ângela, une a
disasters
cada
and events
quatro
happen, critical
eventos
situations
e
happen, as
desastres
Angela
nos
very
últimos
mentioned, one
anos
out of four
tem em
events
nossa região.
and
E justamente a
disasters in the
partir
last
dessas
years happened in
situações
our region
escutamos como os governos nacionais de Banasupra de
based
Honduras e de La
on the
Conab do
situations we
Brasil
heard how all
e
the national
também nos
governments of
governos
Honduras and
locais
Brazil
como de Santa Juana, brilhantemente apresentado aqui pela alcaldesa Ana
Santa
Albornoz,
Juana,
com
brilliantly
todos os elementos
presented
que
by
nos
the mayor
interessam. A força de la
Albornoz. They had
gente,
all the
el
elements we're
poder
focused on, right? We're
campesino, la
interested in the
fuerza de
force
la
of
mujer,
people, the
tudo isso
farmers'
unido
power, the
para
force of
enfrentar
women, all this joined
desafio de
together to be
recuperar
able
ou
to
reinstalar os sistemas alimentares que foram
reinstall all the
afetados
food
por
systems that
esses
were
efeitos
affected by
climatológicos.
those
Também quisiera
climatological or
agradecer
weather events. I'd
bastante a
also like to
todo o
thank
equipo de la FAO que participou da
all
organização
the FAO
deste
team that
webinário,
participated
de
in
Sara,
organizing
de
this
Matico
webinar. I'd like to
como
thank
as
Sara,
moderadoras e
Matico,
também todo o equipo de la FAO que apoiou
and all the moderators and the entire
tremendamente para que
FAO
esse webinário
team,
se realizasse.
which greatly
Quisiera
contributed
concluir
to this
haciendo
webinar. I'd like to conclude by
de llamado para que todos podamos
calling
seguir
upon
unidos
everyone
para enfrentar
for us
os
all to continue together,
desafios
to join
de
forces to
cambio
face
climático que
the
já está.
challenges of climate
Não é mais
change,
uma
the
perspectiva,
challenges that are
tampouco
already
uma
here. It's not a
futurologia.
perspective
Esse
or
cambio
a
climático ligou, nos
future, a
afeta a
futurology,
todos
right?
e
Whether
especialmente
events and climate
as populações
change
mais
affect all of
vulneráveis.
us, and it's
Os
precisely
homens
the
e as
most vulnerable
mulheres del
populations,
campo,
men and
as
women
pessoas vulneráveis em
of
las cidades. A estas
farms, right?
pessoas temos que colocar mais atenção e
We
seguir
need
unidos
to,
para, a partir
farmers,
de
we
um
need to
conceito de uma resiliência,
pay more
podermos
attention
enfrentar
to
esses
these individuals.
choques,
And based on
impactos
resilience,
em
we're going to
nossas
be able to face
cidades
all
a
these impacts in
partir
our
de
cities
ideias e políticas que tratem finalmente de dar,
based on ideas and
además de la
policies that
resiliência,
try
uma
to, in addition
transformação desses
to
sistemas
tackle resilience,
alimentares
try to
para
transform all
uma
these food
qualidade de vida
systems
melhor a todos e
to have a
todas.
better quality
Muitas
of life
graças
for
a todos
everyone.
que
Thank you very much
participaram
to all of you that
pelas redes
participated
sociais, por os canais
in
web de la FAO e
through
também a
the web
todos que se
and
conectaram
remote channels of
aqui
the
para
FAO,
acompanhar
and to
esta
everyone that
linda
connected
atividade.
here
Graças a todos e
to
todas.
Zoom to accompany us in this activity. Thank you, everyone.